Hi everybody, it's Nurse Joy here. Give me just a moment to link my stuff because I'm not good at doing this and I couldn't find the link because I suck. So let me just post this here and here. Well, alright, here we go. I know I'm a little bit late, like always. I had problems. The thing is with that mask, the thing with that is that my laptop is crappy. It's pretty good, but it has this one USB port that just does not. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And now my mic is out. Jesus Christ. Can you hear me? Can you hear me there? Fuck. Hang on, let me post a comment. Can anybody hear me? Oh, okay. Okay. Well, it died there a second ago. I have this. What I was just saying when nobody could hear me is that I have an issue with my laptop. One of my USB ports doesn't. It only works like part of the time, and so yeah. And I left my notebook in the other room. All right. Let me grab the notebook. 1 minute, and I'll be right back. Tripping over all my stuff. Well, it's alright. It's just that one USB port on the computer that's messed up. I couldn't get the mic to work. Okay. Jesus. One of these days I'll get this. I actually started setting everything up earlier than usual today, so I thought maybe that I would else to 30 instead of 60s. Super chat responses, mine else to 30 instead of 60. You might have to DM me about that. So I don't want to mess around with it while we're trying to do this. And yeah, I'm all sweaty and horrible now. Anyway, so yeah, Louis Bleak is actually somebody that I know, like, personally, like IRL. I've known him for years and years and years. So he also does true crime. So everybody check out Bleak Rides, the channel. He does videos about motorcycles and true crime. Fun times. So let's just go ahead and start because I don't know how long my stuff will stay plugged in. So tonight I'm going to talk about something that's a little bit, not really a personal story for me, but it is something that's always kind of upset me. It's the story of Jim Jones and the People's Temple. And when I say story, it's not a story like something made up. I mean, this is real. This happened in 1978. I might cry, just kind of warning everybody. And kind of the trigger warning for this episode is there's a lot of self-harm, or forced self-harm would be a better way to put that. And there's children involved, a lot of children involved. So anybody who might be sensitive to that, I'm not going to play the audio because I unfortunately don't have the editing skills or the know-how to put that on here. So we will be spared from hearing the last sermon or the quote-unquote death tapes. So we're not going to play that, but they're easy to find on YouTube if you are interested in hearing that, which I have listened to them several times at this point. They're very disturbing. Yeah. So the story of Jonestown, the People's Temple, was, I guess you would call it a cult. I mean, there's really not a lot of other ways to put that. It was started off as a religious movement was formed originally in 1955 by the founder Jim Jones. And Jim Jones, I think, starting off with him, kind of a little mini biography of Jim Jones. He was born in 1931, 1931, May 13th, which is like a day before my birthday, so that's kind of disturbing. And hi, everybody in the chat, and hi, the people that are going to watch this later. I do appreciate you coming, and again, thanks for putting up with my disorganization, even though I actually tried today, but that's neither here nor there. So Jim Jones was born in May of 1931, and by the time he was a teenager, he was very religious and very charismatic. And everybody who knew him as a child knew that he was not your typical child. They said that there was some elements of harming animals, which you see a lot in like serial killer types. He was very selfish, very narcissistic. And that's a big surprise. But he found that the church, people were very involved in the church, and he saw that they had a lot of power in doing so. So in 1955, he formed what he called the People's Temple in Indianapolis. And the main kind of focus of the People's Temple was that it was supposed to be racially diverse, mainly geared towards the African American population, who at that time were still being segregated and not allowed in a lot of different places. So Jim Jones said, I'm going to take these people who are disparaged and in need of being risen up. And I don't know if he originally started out meaning to manipulate them, or if that just kind of came about later on. And in a lot of his sermons, were recorded. I've listened to probably, I don't know, hours and hours and hours of this man's preaching, and you can definitely hear over time the shift, and I can't pinpoint a time, but you can hear the shift where he goes from being like a regular preacher in the church to becoming this unhinged maniac. Yeah, Lewis, that wouldn't surprise me. Everybody who talks about Guyana will eventually talk about Jonestown, because it was such a worldwide, like internationally known subject. He was an evil mastermind, there's no doubt about it. And I actually spent most of today, instead of researching just the event itself, because I've read a lot about it, watched a lot of videos about it, watched the movies they made about it, the documentaries. I listened to like a 10-part podcast that had about 30 hours worth of coverage on it. It's he started doing, well, let me go back. Let me get back on. I spent the day researching the psychology of how he manipulated the people using what psychological tactics. And that's a lot deeper than I realized, as far as Jones's actual knowledge of psychology was way, way bigger than I realized. I thought he was just like a charismatic guy who knew how to talk to people, picked the right group of people, but it was so much more than that. He was really obsessed with George Orwell in 1984, and I read a thing today, and it was written by Zimbardo. I can't remember what his first name was. The guy from Stanford that actually set up and executed the Stanford prison experiment. He wrote an unpublished paper about Jonestown and Jim Jones and the correlation between 1984 and how Jim Jones manipulated these people. So in 1955, he formed Jonestown. Not Jonestown, excuse me, the People's Temple. And a lot of the lectures, sermons, whatever you want to call them, were about rising up against capitalism and rising up against the white people. Not necessarily in a we hate white people way, but in a you deserve to be treated equally way. And this might be an unpopular opinion, but I think that Jim Jones, if he didn't go down the road he went down, I feel like he could have done so much good for this country, because he was really into integrating people from different nationalities into one group. He was so charismatic. Everybody loved Jim Jones. He really had something with the way that he talked to people. And I feel like he could have done something great with that. But he went the opposite direction and made it all about himself and lunacy. So they moved to California in 1965, and I'm leaving out a lot of stuff about his personal life. When they lived in Indiana, him and his wife adopted both an Asian child and an African American child. He called it his rainbow family. In fact, the African American child actually was named Jim Jones Jr. And I commented about that earlier to Eugene. I said, if I was him, I would change my name. I would not want to be stuck with the stigma of being junior to fucking Jim Jones, man. So he started talking a lot about socialism and social injustices. And his ideal situation would be that there was no poverty, no war, no all that stuff. Everybody should be given what they are not deserving of, but like if people wanted dental care, they should be able to have that. Everybody should help each other and be one with each other. And then they started looking into and being afraid of nuclear war, and that was a big one. In the mid to late 70s, we started talking a lot about nuclear war, and the reason they went to Guyana is because there were a few places in the world that were deemed safe from nuclear fallout, and Guyana was one of them. So they did a lot of preparing and trying to get land and getting permits to move there and to build their commune, I guess is the best word I can think of for it. And in 1977, in the summer of 1977, the People's Temple did move and relocate to Guyana. And initially, at first, it was called the People's Temple Agricultural Project. And it was it was supposed to be like the pinnacle of an example of what real socialism would be. But Jim Jones had devolved so much in his mind by this point. He had everybody call him dad or father. He thought that at this point that he was like the reincarnation of Christ. And he started making everybody do all this crazy crap. Like, so instead of like a happy environment where everybody contributed, it was everybody contributed to him. They worked from sun up to sundown, barely eating any food. Of course, he kept them up all night, just like that. I'm not sure, Lewis. He said, I wonder what determined Guyana to be safe from nuclear fallout. I never actually considered that as a question or where the other locations would be. So that's something that I never considered, even looking up. But people were starving. They only ate like a tiny bit of rice and some gravy, a little bit of milk. One girl reported that all the food had bugs in it. And I believe her when she said that. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Hi, kitty. And he would keep them up, and everybody knows this tactic with cults. Sleep deprivation makes people easier to control. It makes, I know a lot about sleep deprivation, and you do get in a strange mindset where nothing makes sense. He basically just turned these people into zombies and made them into his slaves, basically, on a lot of different levels, because once he degenerated to this level, he was actually having sex with a lot of people there. Nobody underage that I'm aware of, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did. He actually had one woman, and her job within this community, her only job was to keep his sex schedule. And like she had him slotted in. I mean, she like, okay, well, you're going to have sex with this guy on this day, and guys too, not just women, the men. And he talked a lot about homosexuality and how everyone on the planet except for him were latent homosexuals, and he just made this big thing about it. But he was doing it with everybody there, and he did a lot of uppers, cocaine, and then downers to sleep. He would keep people up for days. talking on the loudspeakers. So the whole time they're working, trying to sleep, they would hear his voice just booming across on these loudspeakers with all of his ridiculous bullshit. And a lot of what he talked about was dying and death for what they believed in. That became such a common thing that he talked about that people became jaded to it. After they moved to Guyana, they had what he referred to as white nights, which were basically practice rehearsals for mass suicide. He would keep them up all night, screaming into the loudspeaker in a cocaine-fueled frenzy, and he would, the first few times he had them, they were drinking just whatever, and he's like, well, now that you've drank that, there's poison in that, and you're all gonna die. And they're crying, and they're like, oh my god, no, we don't want to die. And he's like, haha, just kidding. But this is what's gonna happen. You need to be prepared to commit revolutionary suicide. And that's supposed to be, their deaths would prove a point to the governments that what they were doing wasn't right, and all this stuff, and that it would bring about some sort of giant change to the world, which, spoiler alert, it fucking didn't. So yeah, he would keep everybody awake and do all these these white nights of pretending to poison everybody. And over time, and this is something that I want to look more into, maybe I might write a paper about it, even though I'm not in school or anything. There are a lot of other instances of people doing practice. Like the way that I'm thinking of this specifically was, there was a podcast I listened to about the members of Al Qaeda and ISIS and the guys who did the beheadings. Well, what they would do to keep the people so calm right before these beheadings is they would have mock executions set up, and they would do it over and over and over and over again. They would pretend that they're going to execute this guy so much that they became desensitized to it, or they didn't really believe it was going to happen, or something to that effect. And then they did it for real. And that's kind of, I think, what happened here. They did this so much in practice that the time it was real, it didn't hold as much of an emotional toll as it did at first. So in November of 1978, I'm gonna back up one little bit. People couldn't leave Jonestown. As soon as they came there, Jim Jones confiscated all of their passports, all of their earnings, basically everything. I'm going to adjust this just a little bit. Basically everything that they had, he took. So their passports, all their belongings, their money, every belonging that they had, all they had is basically their clothes. And with no passports, even if you got somewhere, how are you going to get back? You couldn't leave the country without the passport. And so in November of 1978, there was a Senator Ryan, and I can't remember what his first name was. He brought some reporters and some other people over and said, I want to go over there and see what happened, or what's going on here. Like, are these people really happy, or do they want to leave? And so he showed up, and they had a big celebration, and there's video footage of all of this that they found afterwards. So all this video footage is available that they shot. The senator, they had a big celebration and feast planned for when he was there. Sorry, I just froze. He, so he interviewed a bunch of people. They said, yeah, we like you here. We love our dad, Jim Jones, and everything's great. And you can see pictures of a lot of people, and you can tell that they're obviously not really smiling, that they're like, and a lot of talk about they didn't really talk about the revolutionary suicide at that point publicly. And so at this big celebration that night, somebody passed a note to one of the senator's people, or to the senator himself. I think it was one of the reporters. Well, the note fell on the floor, and somebody saw him pick it up and hand it to him. And it was a little boy, and he said, "He passed him a note. He passed him a note." And the note said, "Help get me out of Jonestown." And there was another note that was passed too, but that one didn't have the same amount of significance. And so Jones actually confronted these people. They said, he didn't show any real outward emotion or anger that these people said they wanted to leave. And in total, there were 12 people that decided to leave Jonestown. And the senator said, "Yeah, you can come with us." And so on the morning of November 18th, 1978, everybody that was going to basically defect, I guess is the term they use, and the senator and the reporter, they all loaded up onto a tractor to drive the 6 miles back to the airstrip. And they all said that they could feel the tension in the air. There was something not right. Everything was wrong. When they got to the airstrip and started dividing up into these 2 little planes, men with guns arrived also. And before they could really do anything, these men with these guns opened fire on the people that were leaving. They did kill the senator, one of the cameramen, several of the defectors. One little girl reported watching her. She said she didn't actually see the shot, but she was running towards the woods, and her dad said, "Run towards the woods, hide." And her and about, I believe it was 4 other kids, they ran and hid in the woods. But she remembers looking over and seeing her mom with her brains exposed. And that was the last time she ever saw her mother. Several of the people that went, some of them did survive. The father of the girl did survive, but she watched them shoot her little brother. And she said that's something she could never forget. And so somehow word got back. So one of the planes did depart with some of the people on it, and they did make it back to the United States. And when we get to this point back in Jonestown, somehow the word got around that the senator is dead. And everybody knew what that meant. Like, the time is now. They're going to be sending people here to take us over. Yeah, I love you too. I know we talked about this earlier. Eugene has a personal thing again about this video. So he's gonna peace out. And this really affected me for a long time. It still does. It's just one of those hard things. And he always asks me, like, why do you listen to this stuff if it upsets you so much? And it's one of those, because it upsets me so much, that I want to learn more about it. What makes people do these things? Kind of like the Holocaust. It's such an appalling, horrific thing, and I hate it. But there's something, it's the psychology of it. Why do people do these things? Why? What is it within people that make them act a certain way? And your grandma almost went over there? Jesus Christ, you never told me that. Or if you did, I don't remember it. And so we're going to kind of get into that last part now. When everybody found out that the senator was dead, Jim Jones put the call out that there was a white knight. What's the topic for tonight? The topic for tonight, Chip, is Jim Jones and the People's Temple. I kind of gave a brief rundown on, a very, very brief, and there's a lot of information out there if you want to look further into it. Jim Jones, the head of Jonestown and the People's Temple. And I say Jonestown, that's what they called the settlement in Guyana. I guess I never clarified that. Okay, you did tell me that. Well, I'd like to hear that again at some point. So he called for a white knight, and remember that was the term that he used for the revolutionary suicide on the nights when he would have everybody pretend to drink the poison. But this time it wasn't pretend. He mixed a There was a couple of buckets, I believe, and a big metal vat. Oh, I have a picture. Hang on, let me pull these pictures up. So we got, see, now there's no button for screen sharing. That weirds me out. Like sometimes it's here, sometimes it's not. I actually did pull up some pictures that I don't know. So yeah, there's no button for screen sharing, and that weirds me out because sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. I don't know if anybody uses StreamYard that much. Oh, present. Let me pull these up. Share screen. So let's look at the pictures first because I forgot about them. In the window, entire screen, window, Chrome tab. Window. Okay, here it is. So the first picture I'm going to bring up will be a picture of, and I actually named this picture Jim fucking Jones. So let me bring that up. And it disappeared. What the fuck is with this thing? Because if the window is, here's the thing, if the window is open, it doesn't, I can't see this screen to present it. And if the window is closed, if the window is closed, it doesn't show up on the StreamYard thing. So that's why I'm having a hard time here. Well, here's a picture that it will let me bring up. I don't know why this one is different. Okay, here it is. All right, I got it. I actually named this one Jim fucking Jones. And there's a picture of Jim Jones. He looks pretty young in this picture. I'm not sure when this was taken. The sunglasses are kind of iconic. Like most of the pictures, you'll see him wearing these sunglasses. Let's see here. And the next one will be, let me pull it up. Another picture of Jim Jones. Actually, I think I can, looks normal. Yeah, he looks like a normal guy. He really does. So the next one I will pull up will be another picture of him. Pretty much looking normal. Here's another one. There's a picture of Jim Jones preaching. He's a little bit older here. I didn't get any of the pictures of him. There's a lot of footage of him like in the very last few days. There's not, I didn't pick any of those pictures out to put on here. But where I was going with that is to, let me close this one out. Close this one out. All right, this next picture I'm going to bring up is a picture of the actual, and warning, there are pictures of bodies here. I don't know if YouTube will allow me to show this, so if I get canceled or whatever, you know what happened. Here's a photo of the vat of Kool-Aid, or Flavor Aid, if you want to get technical about it. It was Flavor Aid mixed with not phenobarbital, that was somebody else. Cyanide and Valium. Cyanide and Valium. So that's the picture of the actual jug that they drank the poison out of, and unfortunately, you can see in the background some of the victims of this tragedy. And I do have one final picture. I'm not going to pull it up yet. The resolution on it's pretty bad. It's pretty small. I didn't realize that would be the case until later on, but I'm not monetized. No, I'm not. Yeah, the punch. Yeah, the Kool-Aid. And that's actually literally where the saying, don't drink the Kool-Aid, comes from. As sick as that is. And I make a lot of dark jokes. I have a very dark sense of humor. It's because that's a coping mechanism. And anybody who's in, I can't speak for other professions, but anyone who's in nursing especially it does something to you. Like, you make jokes that you would not even imagine that horrible shit coming out of yourself because you're really a good person, but it's like and I read the psychology of that. It's like a relief valve, like the feeling of stress and tension that comes up in you, the only way to get that out is to become violent yourself. The drink was Flavor Aid. That's what, yeah, it was actually grape Flavor Aid. And there's another video, and it's easy to find also, of Jim Jones going through their inventory of food. And the camera actually goes to the packages of Flavor Aid, and he's like, oh, there's a bunch of Kool-Aid. And it's really, in hindsight, it goes, yeah, the darkness helps with coping. It definitely does. And that's the point I was making with that, is that sometimes I'll say things that are, or I'll laugh at something horrible, and it's not because I'm horrible. It's a coping skill to deal with these kinds of things. I have to find various ways to laugh at otherwise horrific pre-hospital settings. It's a coping mechanism. Yeah, and I talked to a guy who was his wife was my hospice patient, and he was a fireman back before, and he told me some stuff that blew me away, and there's no way I could do that. I could not be an EMT or a fireman or any of that. Kobe. Yeah, that's kind of ironic, talking about, that was kind of like I don't want to say a Freudian slip because it wasn't meant, but it was kind of a weird coincidence that you said Kobe, and we're talking about Africa. Terrible, terrible. So the Flavor Aid with cyanide and Valium in it. And he said, and this is actually on audio. This is recorded on audio. And this is the one that I was referring to as like the death tape. That's what everybody calls it. The final sermon of Jim Jones. He was on the loudspeaker talking to everyone while they were drinking the Kool-Aid, Flavor Aid. And he was encouraging them. He says, this isn't suicide. This is revolutionary suicide. And and I knew this was going to happen, and I apologize if I'm hard to understand. The first ones to take the poison were the smallest children, infants, some of them newborn. They had little oral syringes full of poison, and the mothers shot the poison into their babies' mouths, and then they took it themselves. And a lot of the mothers, died with their children in their arms. Husbands died with wives. A lot of these were forced. This was not a suicide. This was a massacre. A lot of, they basically said, if you don't do this willingly, we will kill you. And they did shoot a few people. More people got injected with the poison if they wouldn't take it willingly. And so the next morning, then there's the kids screaming at something. The next morning, the people found the aftermath. Not everyone that was there, about 80 people escaped, either by pretending to be dead, running off into the woods. One old lady slept through the whole thing, I guess. She woke up and everyone was dead. There was a total of 918 people died. 909 of them were from poison, or 909 of them, I guess, were at the actual community. And 304 of them were under the age of 17. That's 304 children were forced to drink poison. And it is very upsetting to me. It's hearing that footage of Jim Jones preaching and encouraging everyone. You can just imagine it in their minds, of everyone standing around. There's people with guns pointed at you. A couple of people came up and said, Jim, we don't want to die here. We can do more without dying. And he's like, no, we can't. We tried that. It didn't work. Now we have to die. And Jim Jones was amongst the dead, but he did not drink the poison. It's speculated that he may have had someone else kill him by gunshot, or he did it himself. And either way, I think that's a ridiculous cop-out. He should have died the same way that everybody else did. not quick and painless. And all I really have to say about that is that I'm fucking glad he's dead. And I hope he's in hell right now, if there is a hell. So the last photo that I have to show you is taken from a helicopter. It's taken from a helicopter over Jonestown the next day. And like I said, it's a very poor resolution. It's pretty small. But here is a picture of, I don't know if you can see my mouse hovering. That is exactly what you think it is. That is bodies strewn about all over the place. I'm kind of glad I didn't get a better resolution for this. It's pretty disturbing. So now we're left with these 900 people that are dead. Most of them children, under half, I guess, were children. Not most of them, but it was a lot. It was a lot. Thank you, Bleak. And I tried not to cry. And I know it makes it hard to report on stories when you're so emotional, but it was just a very emotional story, especially with the children being involved. Someone's knocking at my door. It's probably somebody's knocking at my door. So there's that. And there's tons and tons and tons of documentaries about this. There's tons of audio footage, video footage, pictures. Yeah, 304 children, and they were anywhere from all ages, little, 8-year-olds. I was just watching a documentary about this while I was setting up. One man saw a little boy, he said he was about 7 years old, convulsing, and he picked him up and ran with him, and he died in his arms. And I don't know how he survived, but it's a very, I'm trying not to put myself in that position. Like, I can't imagine being one of those mothers forced to feed your own baby poison. Yeah, the Sylvia Likens one was really bad. I'm not gonna really go into it, but that Sylvia Likens was one that Bleak Rides covered, and it was a story of a girl who was tortured by originally by her parents left her with basically a babysitter. Pardon me, and this babysitter somehow got her own kids and like an entire neighborhood of kids to come over and torture this girl to death. It was it was gross. It was horrible. And yeah, and I'm a crier. Anybody that knows me in real life knows that I'm a crier. At least I am for the last few years since I had a kid. It just tore me up. Oh, thank you. It, ever since I got pregnant, it did something to me. The cat's knocking stuff over now. So it's like some sort of switch. I never used to be a crier or sensitive and then when I got pregnant and had my son, everything changed. Everything in my life changed. Anybody who is a parent would understand that. And maybe even some that aren't, it's weird. I don't know. But this is a really hard one for me, and I wasn't going to do it today, but I was watching the documentaries anyway, and I said, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I wanted it to be longer with more details about the degeneracy of Jim Jones and just his ridiculous narcissistic personality. I don't know. I guess I'm kind of glad we'll kind of keep it to here, but part of what I was looking into was like the psychology behind it. How did he mind control these people, literally to the point that they kill themselves? These stories do need told. They're hard to tell, they're hard to hear, but it's one of those, like, history repeats itself if we don't educate ourselves about it. And so he used a lot of tactics like picking it, and a lot of these are cult tactics, picking people who are disparaged, who are socially repressed, who have nothing, who are needy and in one way or another, and saying, I can help you, I can save you. And then there was the repetition, then he isolated them. They weren't allowed to talk to each other. They weren't allowed to talk to their families. So the isolation is another way that he controlled them. Sleep deprivation, starvation, all of those things combined left these people so vulnerable that even without the threat of being killed if they didn't drink the poison, I think a lot of them would have still done it. I mean, just because they had nothing else to go back to, or for one reason. I mean, and so that was kind of the rundown, the short version of the People's Temple, and how so many people they call it a mass suicide. I think a lot of that might not. I just said that a lot of them would have, but we'll never really know how many of the people actually would have not done it if they had the option to leave. And Jim Jones, man. I have a list of people who I think are the biggest pieces of shit alive, and he's right up there. I mean, he's not number one. That wonderful fucking position goes to Hitler, but he's like number 2 or 3 on the list for sure. So that was kind of a bummer. I should prepare palate cleansers for these. I don't really have anything prepared. I think I'll do some palate cleansers for the next episode. Some of the next stuff that I have coming up, I think I have a couple of people who have voiced interest in coming on as guests, and so I'm gonna contact them and see when would be a good time to either record something or come on live. And I may go right into the next cult. I don't like to use the word cult when I talk about Heaven's Gate. I may do them next so that I can talk about the differences between Jonestown and Heaven's Gate and why, even though they were both quote unquote mass suicides, the differences and the similarities in between them. So there'll be some personal accounts coming up. I had kind of a strange one last week at work myself. And again, I don't know how much of this was real or how much of this was just made up by my own mind. But I was walking down the hall at work. Yeah, save some palate cleansers on a playlist. That's what I was pretty much gonna, if I hear a story that I think would make a good palate cleansers, because I do have a list of topics actually too that I want to talk about. I was walking down the hall at work, and it's 4:00 in the morning, and I see something come out from the corner towards me. And thank you, Bleak, thank you. And it looked like a person, but a little bit more like kind of elongated, like the face was kind of long, and like the limbs were very, very long, the legs, and it looked disturbingly like one of our residents who lived downstairs from where I was. And about 20 minutes later, I get called by the nurse downstairs, and they say, "Hey, we need you to come down and confirm a death." When somebody dies at the nursing home, 2 nurses have to attempt to listen for a heartbeat, and just to make sure that one person isn't making a mistake, I guess. So I go down, and it's the same fucking guy. And I'm like, how's that even a thing? Like this, I saw this weird apparition. Oh, that's okay. Thank you. It was this weird apparition that appeared that looked like this person, except for kind of distorted. And then that person literally died. Like, so if that was something that my brain made up, and I didn't even know this person was sick. I mean, obviously they're in a nursing home. They're not at the pinnacle of their health and youth. But what was the odds of this person dying right after I saw this thing that looked like them? Was it his spirit, like, being pulled to the other side? Was it just a coincidence? Something I made up in my mind? Did somehow I hear somebody talking about him and subconsciously made a connection? I don't know. So that was kind of a weird I mean, I don't know. Those are the things that I feel weird about sharing these personal experiences publicly, because I am full of so much skepticism, even for my own experiences. Ah, thank you, Lewis. Thank you. A little bit more comfortable, yeah. Crying publicly wasn't cool. I don't even have tissues in here. Uh, but, there are other stories that are probably going to upset me to that point. This one was one of the hardest ones, though. I mean, as far as that goes. So I think we're going to keep this short tonight, because I know there's a lot of stuff popping off in the uh, other side of the internet that is a lot of fun right now. Some of the trolling stuff, and I know that somebody has a stream planned for tonight that we were going to keep an eye on. So I may not be the most prepared for a lot of these. See, the thing is, a lot of these cases, and like Lewis just said, sounding more comfortable. I am getting more comfortable. I need to not fixate so much on the dates, and maybe more telling the story how I see it, because I can really thank you guys so much, that I can really talk about how I feel about these cases more than the actual factual. You can get the facts anywhere. So yeah, so we're not going to sit around and bullshit too much. We got a lot of stuff to talk about in other places. So everybody say goodnight to Baby, who likes to try to knock over everything. In fact, I get to clean up a giant mess she made in here of all my crafting supplies that, granted, they were piled up, but she decided to knock it all off on the floor. So, all right, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and end this stream. Everybody check out my friend Bleak Rides. Check out his channel. Check out WTRD. That's my husband. And everybody have a good night. And thanks for coming. And broadcast.